Hello everyone, and welcome to this PAT Solution webinar, which we are going to present for you today. We are going to talk about better reaction monitoring, and this is the third webinar in this PAT Solution webinar series. We started out with an overview webinar talking about PAT in general, and not too long ago we also presented a batch reaction or batch monitoring webinar. And both of those, they are available in recorded format on our web pages, and this one will also be recorded, and we will make it available to you in the web pages afterwards. The special thing about this webinar is that we have our guest speaker, Doug Hausner from Thermo Fisher Scientific, and very welcome to you, Doug. Thank you for joining us here today. And with that, let's just start. So starting out then, just presenting ourselves. I am Geir Floten. I'm working in Camo Analytics. I'm responsible for our solutions, which means that I'm talking a lot with customers, trying to link their challenges, their problems, with the solutions we are working on or providing from Camo. So Chuck, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello everyone. My name is Chuck Miller. I'm Chief Data Scientist at Camo Analytics. My main function here at Camo Analytics is mainly end user support, as well as consulting and training, as well as science technical development. And like you said, we have a guest participant this time, Doug Hausner.
Hi everyone. My name is Doug Hausner. I'm a guest, as has been mentioned already. I'm from Thermo Fisher Scientific. I've been with Thermo Fisher for about 4 months or so, helping in the continuous manufacturing group there, primarily the solid dose group, but also interfacing with the flow chemistry group that I'm going to speak to you about today. Prior to joining Thermo Fisher, I've been involved in continuous for nearly a decade, though, working with a lot of people in the industry as part of the Rutgers University Engineering Research Center that was focused on continuous manufacturing.
Great, thank you for that, Doug. And before moving into actually talking about our subject of the day, just reminding you about who Camo Analytics are, because we are a data analytics company, and we see it as our mission to accelerate different industrial digitalization initiatives. And our basis, our starting point, is really what we call science-based analytics, and some of you will probably recognize it as multivariate data analysis. And the last couple of years, we have focused a lot on PAT, process analytical technology, bringing up our mission then to help people to use MVA and other modeling methods, other types of analytics in real time. I mean, we're working with a range of different companies across different verticals, and if we are focusing on the pharmaceutical vertical, we see that we are working with a lot of the big pharmas, and we also have been through several GMP audits, and it's been we have shown or we have proven that our software is possible within these audits. And altogether, what we are providing is really a suite or a platform for doing PAT in the widest sense. So, Chuck, maybe you want to say a little bit about why we are here.
Yeah, well, why are we here? Very good question. Back in the background of this slide, before the build, you might have noticed there were two bars. This is a data analyst, some business analysts indicating a quite dramatic growth in PAT PAT equipment sales from 2017 to 2023. That's over double. And so with that background, one would have to infer that PAT is getting a large traction, a large following in the end user industries. And so really, there's a couple things about why, the more general reason why we're here is just to discuss common pain points and challenges. That will be totally transparent about the difficulties and challenges of PAT implementation, but also on the positive side to be empowering to get more to help businesses to achieve extraordinary results. So more specifically, the red dots correspond more targeted to what this specific webinar is about, as opposed to the others that everyone has mentioned. We're going to focus on reaction monitoring and giving you some framework and guidelines around going up the maturity curve in as little as 6 months. So yeah, and the result, we want to help you all join the movement.
Yeah, I concur, Chuck. That sounds like a great ambition. And if we're looking then a little bit on the drivers behind all of this, there are some changes that are out in the market. We see that a lot of verticals, and including the pharma, they are looking further into digitalization, and headlines like Industry 4.0, Pharma 4.0, it's more and more in the discussions. And we also have a situation where regulation is getting a little bit tighter in terms of quality requirements and also compliance standards. And furthermore, we see that in the competitive environment, there is some quality pressures. And that is followed by opportunities from the technological advancements, which means that we have some sort of a perfect storm brewing here, where we have the increase in demand and we have increase in our opportunities. And the way we are seeing this then, or the way we're looking at it, is that there are two opportunities for companies today. They can go into what we could call surviving mode, which is all about trying to remain relevant and competitive and doing sort of a minimum implementation of these PAT methods. Or you can go for the more ambitious thriving mode, where you're trying to use these opportunities and use these business drivers to actually get a competitive advantage. And that will, of course, help you then to both grow your business and also to do innovation to increase your cost savings and your opportunities. And then the question to you, Chuck, what is really special then about reaction monitoring?
Well, what's special? What's different about reaction monitoring versus other types of PAT? Those of you involved in reaction chemistry, API chemistry, have a very keen understanding of this. But I wanted to lay out these differences. I think characteristics, the attributes are on the top. Generally, we're working with chemistry or phase changes, as well as inline sensors, and sometimes kinetic modeling and mechanistic type modeling. It's very relevant in reaction chemistry. The operations tend to be very closed systems for obvious reasons, for safety, for quality. That results in limited opportunity for intervention. Once the stuff's in the reactor, you're stuck with it. You can't get in and change anything. You can't intervene. And then obviously some of the challenges in that such closed system, there are things that other types of PAT can utilize. Grab sampling, not a reality, not a possibility in chemistry. A lot of concerns are also around side reactions leading to impurities, and sort of kicking the can down the road for the downstream processes to clean up the mess you made upstream by adding impurities. So then at the bottom, you'll notice there's some examples. We want to clarify that there's both batch and continuous mode reaction monitoring, and I think a lot of the batch type things are more traditional chemistry, crystallization, API, even some what I'll call old school polymer operations. But then, of course, we have the continuous block, and Doug, I'm going to hand this off to you because this is where you're going to talk specifically.
Yeah, I mean, so when we talk about reaction monitoring, it's very important when we talk about continuous processes. We want to be able to monitor the process, like you said, make sure we're not seeing things like side reactions and impurities, make sure that the process is stable. And to be honest, if it's not, there is the ability to intervene in terms of, changes to the process downstream, right? So being able to monitor and then, control the process with feedback loops is a big part of, doing continuous processing right. And it all starts with being able to, monitor the process and have the analytics that allow you to do that properly.
Yeah, thank you for that, Doug. And if we are looking then into the opportunities we have out there for better monitoring, for improving our monitoring approaches, we can start to look on the opportunities for starting to use what we could call advanced sensors, because with these advanced sensors, spectroscopic sensors and the like, we have the opportunity to actually look into the chemical properties or the chemical information of the reactants and the products. And this is an improvement over what we could call traditional sensors, the temperatures, the pressures and the like, where we are monitoring more what is happening with our vessel or with the reaction in an external manner. And of course, if we can have good measurements, even around the actual chemical transaction or transition, or what is happening in terms of the environment within the reactor, then we can start to build models and we can start to look on, is this reaction going as planned? Are there any deviations here? Is it comparable to the previous reaction? And we can start to think about, okay, how can we now put on quality parameters? How can we define good quality reactions? And as we are getting more and more insight, we can start to think about predicting the performance of a reaction, do planning and selection maybe of reactant batches and the like. And also, of course, as we are getting better at this, we can start to think about optimizing our reactions, understand them better and improve them even further. And all of this is linking back to what we could call continuous improvement. And if you're thinking then a little bit about these levels of reaction monitoring maturity, Chuck, you have a point there, right?
Yeah. So this is, we wanted to provide a framework to help everyone understand where along the maturity curve they are. And so this framework is a 3-level framework where level 1 is, we call it reactive, 2 is proactive, and 3 is predictive. And so you'll notice there's 3 rows here that are attributes of these 3 levels of maturity. So if we look at the first level, which is the technologies that are typical for these 3 levels, as Gerruna mentioned earlier, reactive way, what I'll call the old school way, is primarily physical property sensors. But when we go to level 2, proactive, we start to get into more chemical sensors, and that includes advanced analyzers like PAT analyzers, FTIR, FBRM, Raman, and so forth. And now all the way in the predictive level, we start to take that to the next level, meaning now we have multiple advanced sensors and analyzers that can be auto-aggregated in real time. And the second set of attributes are the objectives. Typically, the objectives are a little different at the 3 levels. Level 1 objective is typically safety, asset protection, meaning no incidents, higher utility, improved yields and reduced waste. So, reactive is still a very value-adding level to be on. But if you go up to proactive, now you start getting into things like improved understanding of the process that Gerruna you mentioned earlier, improved operations and reduced waste. And then at the predictive level, then we've got even more operations or objectives that are important, including improved quality assurance and what I call data democratization. Workflows are for these 3 levels are examples of things that folks do at these levels of maturity. So typically level 1 is recipe driven, more historical data review, post process QA, lab QA. But as we go into the higher levels, we start to get into workflows that start to look at things like more raw material analysis, closed loop control in a simple sense, retrospective investigations, as well as dashboards, what I'll call simple dashboards of the process. And then predictive, at the highest level workflows, we start looking at things like predictive analytics, like you mentioned, actually predicting quality ahead proactively. And so, in a way, a lot of folks might be at level 2, and level 2 is a good place to be. But what we're going to try to show you here is that there's value going up, even up to level 3. And so that's basically the levels, maturity, the framework that we laid out for you.
Yeah, and picking up on your point about value, Chuck, we can have a look on the business impact, right? Because as we are moving through these 3 levels, of course, there is an element of increasing cost, because as we are going through from reactive to proactive and further on to predictive, we will need a little bit more sensors, a little bit more instrumentation. We might need a little bit more software, different sort of tools in that respect. And also we might need different skill sets in terms of getting some analysis or sort of interpretation and insight out of the data which is made available to us through the different levels. But the good news is that there is a net gain as we move through the level. So as we are increasing cost, also the savings are increasing. So we are developing our insight, we are getting a better handle on our operation, and that means that we are better equipped to actually run this operation as it should be run and to sort of optimize it. And that gives us the savings. And furthermore, there is this opportunity for what we call business growth, or more the innovation aspect, where from the understanding and insight we are getting from getting more and more data and more insight through the models, we are in a position where we can start to think about not only stepwise improvement, but actually making huge leaps in terms of the improvement and do real innovation in this space, which gives us an even better net gain. And a typical. Sorry, Jack, you wanted to...
No, I just wanted to add, if I may, the business growth part is, I think this graphic is very nice because it's kind of creeping up on you there. We said in the PAT webinar, PAT enables innovation. Not a lot of folks appreciate that, and I think the reason for that is because the folks, once you get up that maturity curve, that innovation part of PAT starts to really show up. And so I just wanted to emphasize that part.
Well, I mean, it's really about tackling the complexity, right? The more you know, the more you can, look at, optimizing and pushing things to the maximum extent of efficiency, right? When you're in reactive, right, you're just trying to keep things as similar as possible, but there are things that change that you don't see necessarily, and the more pieces that you can bring into the puzzle, the more you can understand and get to the point that you can actually, like we said before, predict and control downstream.
Exactly.
Yes, no, that is really well put, Doug. And also when we look on these areas of business benefits, of course, they are recognizable from other PAT activities. It's it's the quality assurance, it's the data-rich development or data-driven view of things. You get better overall equipment efficiency and reducement in these COGS measurements. And of course, all of this, as we are using data to run our process, data to gain the insight, we have a compliant and secure approach to that. And if I
just wanted to mention too that the numbers there are not just made up. These are from actual applications cases. The 2 million on tech transfer, the 800 for extra utility, and the 600 for wasted raw material in a batch process.
Yeah, definitely significant numbers also. So that's great. And you had some views on this reaction monitoring levels and approaches.
Yeah, just a quick review. As opposed to when we introduced the 3 levels of maturity, here we're showing the tools that are in the tools, the technical tools, digging down into some of the technology and the math that are used, that are typical for these 3 levels. So traditional obviously is very value adding. Univariate SPC is well established with traditional sensors, but as we go proactive, we start to get more data-rich environments, and so we can do some things, multivariate SPC, multivariate curve resolution, which is very popular in reaction chemistry. And then the next level, we can actually start doing predictive models, looking at quality predictive models, or even model-based control schemes, where as opposed to just simple closed-loop control. Yeah, and then this chart is, it's a little busy, but certainly you're free to look at it in detail. The attempt here is the high-level thinking here is, as we go up these levels, we increase our capabilities. So the left-hand column is a list of all these different technical capabilities that become available to you as you mature up this curve. And then these capabilities add to more diverse benefits. And so on the right-hand side is an attempt to list all the different types of benefits that become available to you as you add these capabilities. And so, this is just the perspective, from our perspective, what we see, some of the value adding, some of the benefits there. You'll see safety, cycle time, democratization of data. I mentioned that earlier. That's basically a concept where you're providing more visibility to your process to more people. that make decisions.
Yep. So thank you for that, Chuck. And as you said, we will make these slides available later, so anybody with a special interest can dig down and really get the benefits. But if we take a step back then, or a step into this, what we can look at when we're talking about reactions, it's of course that we have some reactants, one or more reactants, which are reacting in some chemical reaction, generating one or more products. And if we have like a outline of that, it could look something like what we are showing on the slide here. And as you see then, for the reactants themselves, it's possible to think about some raw material properties which we can measure or get hold of. As we are running the reaction, we can think about process data, which is more like temperature, pressures, all of that. And also we can think about inline sensors, which is more those advanced sensors. And of course then at the end, the product will be characterized with some sort of quality measurement. And if we think about inline sensors, it could be these spectroscopic sensors, which are giving us a view like the one we are showing there. And the information behind there is actually the different molecular groups which are giving absorbance in the different wavelengths or in the different regions of the spectrum. And depending on the data which is available, we have different ways of looking into these reactions as they are running. On the right hand side now, we are showing us three typical examples. Top one is about curve resolution, looking at consume of reactants and generation of products. And of course, there is a little bit of intermediates in the process as well, depending on what type of reaction part we're looking at. The middle one is about doing trajectory modeling, where we're trying to look on repeated runs of a reaction and trying to see are there similarities or deviations as we are running through them. And the bottom one is more about where we have maybe a design space or reaction space, and we are monitoring to ensure that we are within that space. And the last one is maybe typical more for a continuous type of reaction. And that gives me the opportunity to, reintroduce Doug Hausner, which is our guest speaker from Thermo Fisher Scientific. So, Doug.
Thank you. I've got a few slides here where I get the opportunity as part of this webinar to talk to you about what we're doing at Thermo Fisher. I worked with this with a colleague, Peter, out of Austria, where our API group is. And for the last few years, the group has been looking more and more at options in terms of continuous processing. Obviously, it's been a batch industry when we talk about API manufacturing by and large, throughout its lifetime. If you go to the next slide, though, we can talk to a little bit about, where we see advantages, with continuous manufacturing. And so, really the impetus for, exploring continuous manufacturing, was, the idea of being able to access different chemistries. And so when you talk about different chemistries, you're talking about things that are sometimes difficult chemical reactions from the standpoint of being perhaps dangerous, highly exothermic reactions, for example. But also, to the point brought up before, right, the idea that if it's a difficult control reaction with a lot of different side products where there's, a high degree of variability, continuous manufacturing can also bring advantages there in terms of the smaller volumes and the ability to continuously monitor and control the process. And so when you look at the difference between, batch manufacturing on the left and continuous manufacturing on the right, at each step within the process, you may be doing the same sort of reaction, but the equipment and the ability to monitor that reaction may be different. And so when we talk about batch manufacturing, we're going through different cycles and this idea of test and release. So we run each step, we verify that step is what we'd like it to be, and then we move it on to the next step. And there's always a time lag between those steps. And obviously a lot of infrastructure needed to be able to run these, because oftentimes they're run at larger scale. When we talk about doing the same thing in continuous manufacturing, the volume of each of those steps might be significantly smaller, but they're going from one unit operation into the next continuously. And so we're not going to stop and test. Now we're going to, test in line as the process is happening and try to make sure that we can control that process to keep things running smoothly from unit operation to unit operation. And so, with that, the analytics need to have certain attributes. And so one is that, we need them to be quick, right? If we're moving from unit operation to unit operation, we don't necessarily have the same time that we would have for a bench scale analysis. We can't wait as that reaction moves its way through the continuous, manufacturing continuous reactor, the continuous flow reactor. And so things need to be able to be done in a reasonable amount of time. And sometimes there's a trade-off there between the number of spectra you can get and the quality of those spectra. And that's again where analytics can help to be able to do things a little bit better. These things also need to be reliable. We're talking about doing this in a manufacturing environment, and so we need methods that are both robust and that are validated. And we need to be able to do this again in a GMP fashion, and so we need the data acquisition as well as the data storage to be compliant, particularly here in the US to CFR Part 11. And so those are some of the things that we think about when we go from the idea of concept to practice for the continuous manufacturing inline analytics. And so if you move to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how we kind of go through the process. And we talked about the idea that we need robust processes, or robust sensors, things that can manage things in a reasonable time frame. And so there's a lot of different options out there in terms of the technology that you could look at. And one of the things that has really happened, I would say, in the last half decade or decade is a lot of evolution of these types of sensors. As the technology has come forward, people put more emphasis on the sensor as well as the analytics, and so we have a lot of different options to choose from in terms of that. And again, I think part of this comes from the idea that these may have originally been benchtop techniques, and how do you adapt them for inline analysis? And so I think that's still an area that is evolving, and these sensors are still getting better and better. But for us, we'll start in the lab. We'll do proof of principle. What is it that we're trying to monitor? We'll look at the different tools that we currently have available to us and try to understand, which one is going to be best, which one is going to give us the right chemical sensitivity, which one can do the most different analyses, right? Because, if we can use one sensor instead of 3 at the same spot within a reaction, that's just an efficiency benefit. And so we'll try to understand, what different things can be analyzed with the different sensors simultaneously. And once we've kind of made that decision of what we think is, a good choice in terms of the proof of principle in the lab, then we'll start to look at things in terms of the data reliability. How well does this work in terms of the plant operation? Is it a good fit for our manufacturing area? Because again, there may be some things that provide excellent data, but are just a little bit more finicky, need to be worked on more often, require more, expertise in terms of the minute-by-minute utilization of the technique. And those are things that need to be thought about when we go from the lab into the manufacturing area. In the end, we'll normally select between a few different options, and then we'll do studies on which one is best in a plant environment. And then we'll narrow that down and start to move forward in terms of validating that method, being able to put it into real use within the process control system, and interfacing it into the quality systems to be able to use that data for reporting and for release. And one of the things that people look at when we talk about using sensors, and particularly when we're talking about using chemical sensors, is the ability to be able to do immediate release, real-time release. And really, one of the things there is being able to have that chemical sensitivity to say, this is my product, this is the ratio of that to byproducts, and be able to have that information to move forward. And I think that's one of the big things that changes when you go from the level 1 to the level 2 that we talked about, and therefore I think also been something that's been an emphasis for continuous manufacturing.
Great, thank you for that, Doug. And if we're then moving into talk a little bit about systems, how do we achieve this? We have prepared a picture here, which is trying to show you a reaction reactor on the left-hand side. And if we are looking on that reactor, it is of course a type of batch reactor here, but this could be a continuous reactor as such. And typically then this reactor is connected to some sort of automation system. So we have listed a few here, but of course there are more opportunities. And these control system, very often they are keeping things in check, so you are not getting critical temperatures, critical pressures, that kind of thing. But they are also typically giving out process data, real-time measurements of the temperatures, of the pressures. And then in the next line here, we have some call it advanced sensors, spectroscopic measurements, linking back to what Doug was talking about in the previous slide. So we have some spectroscopic sensor, we have some image sensors, we have NMR, MS, all of those. And they are giving us some sort of data going into the system. And in the system, typically then we have different user levels, operators, traffic light system, subject matter experts, maybe need to have a better view of the process, what's going on in the process, and then the quality person who might need to just know whether we are within those CPPs or CQAs and staying where we should be staying. And at the very top, maybe with a dotted line into this system, there is a management responsibility, which might be looking on multiple lines, multiple sites, thinking about things like overall equipment efficiencies and trying to optimize the utilization of the different resources. And in order to achieve then this type of real-time reaction monitoring with all of its levels, it is required to have some sort of solution which is both able to read and handle data in real time, but which is also having some sort of analytics opportunity, some powerful ways in understanding or interpreting the data, so we can translate the measurements into insights and then deliver that at the point where it is required. And we claim, of course, that Unscrambler or modeling tool and PulsePulse or PAT platform or PAT data management tool, that together they are able to provide you all of this. And then I believe, Chuck, you have some views on the process technology people aspect.
Well, right. Yeah, this is just a summary of what a long list of items here that we like to call keys to success or keys to succeed in the three different categories: process, technology, and people. And we don't have enough time to go through all of these, so certainly feel free to look through these. These are things that certainly from our experience have come into play. On the process, I'd like to pick out just a few. In the process side, certainly the sensor and instrument diagnostics, I think, is very important. A lot of folks focus on the model development and method development, but kind of neglect the fact that a lot of these instruments and sensors have diagnostics that tell you how healthy they are. It's very important to keep track of the health indicators as well as the analytical data. In the technology side, I think platform flexibility and scalability is a huge key to success. You don't want to get stuck in a rut where you're a platform that cannot be is not extensible or transferable to sites. Otherwise, you could end up hitting a roadblock to getting to that level 2, level 3 area. And then on the people side, I really want to emphasize the bottom point there around inclusion. Lots of different folks involved in success here, including engineering, obviously the QA lab, IT, especially IT and automation, including CMC and regulatory. I don't know, Garun, if you have any additional items here that are
yeah, maybe we should also pull out this one, which is called data integrity, Chuck, because of course, when we are working, particularly when we are working in regulated environments, right, the data integrity is key. But also, even if you are in a non-regulated environment, of course, we need to be able to trust our data. We need to have good systems for pulling right data, and we need to have traceability for our data. So that data integrity is really the key when we are basing our insight, our understanding of the process or the reaction on the data themselves, right?
Yeah, I would agree. Especially now, the trend is much higher scrutiny on integrity and security, cybersecurity of data. So absolutely.
Well, and when we're talking about pharma, I mean, it's not even an option, right? I mean, it has to be done when you talk about data compliance.
Yeah. No, that's a very strong point you have there, though.
Yeah, can attest to that.
Yeah, but then thinking a little bit about, okay, how do we go about doing this? And this is really a different view of the last slide you were showing, Doug, where we are thinking about, okay, how do we move from starting to think about the project and to actually getting that project in place and in line and ready for daily use. And the way we have done this in this slide is that we are looking on the insights part, which is all about exploring the challenge at hand, exploring the reaction we are going to look at, and trying to understand then what are the key elements here. What is it, the temperatures, is it the reactants, and the like. And with that explorative information in our back pocket, we can start to think about the science. We can start to think about planning of data collection, planning of creating models and what type of models we are going to build. And then, of course, getting to the step where we are actually validating those models, doing some test runs, getting some test data to validate the inference or the insights which we have assumed or developed through the models. And together then, these three first steps, they are providing us with what we could call insights. And this is where we claim also that if you have the right type of interaction, the right type of advice when you're doing these insight steps, it's feasible to do this within the 4 to 6 months period. And then, of course, with the insights, with the models, with the proven the method in hand, we can move on to installation, where we're actually trying to put the instrument into the production facility. And then we are trying to ensure that we are getting a system around that instrument, around that sensor, which is giving us the real-time view of the reaction as we want it. And this is where we are in the step where we are doing reaction monitoring, and we have the opportunity to do continuous improvement. And of course, as we are moving to the right here, we have a increasing business value as shown on the very right hand side, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, if I may, that yeah, I agree, Doug. This is like your last slide, except it's focused instead on instruments, measurement hardware. It's focused on models and platforms for analytics. Same thing, actually. It's a project slide. And there's basically three things I take away from this. One is don't be scared, don't be intimidated. A lot of folks are afraid to go into PAT and analytics because of the project cost, the project timeline. That 4 to 6 months is not just a number we throw out there. There's some basis for that this can be done in a reasonably timely time frame. Second thing is the business value is realized later on, but it's a tremendous business value. The insights, like all that, those first stages of the project are like investing for the future. And then once that business value is realized, it can be tremendous. And then the final point, this is more of a plug for us, for all of us here, is that we can help you. We at Camo, we at Thermo Fisher can help you. You don't have to go out of this all alone.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think it's important to take a step back and think about things holistically, because you have a number of different things that come together here. Like you mentioned, the software and the analytics, and also the hardware, but also think about it from a people perspective, in the sense that traditionally, right, when you're talking about batch processing, you go to send it off to a QC lab, those can be very siloed. But as we go more towards continuous, like I've been talking about, those things need to work together more, and so there's just more this idea of collaboration between the different parts of the hardware, but also the different parts of the people side of things.
Yeah, good point.
No,
yeah.
Great stuff. But okay, we are getting towards the end of this webinar, but it's important to say that this webinar is something which we like to look at as a conversation starter more than a completed conversation. And what we want to do is that we want to extend an invitation to all of you guys listening here to have these what we call PAT expert session. And these PAT expert sessions, that's basically an opportunity for any of you on an individual basis or with your team to continue this conversation with Chuck and myself. So in order to do that, you can do, you will, after this webinar, you will get like a survey. And in that survey, there is an opportunity to sign up for expert sessions like this. And in this slide, what we have done is that we have suggested a couple of discussion areas where Chuck and I think that it's useful to continue the discussion. But also do note that last item there, which is about bringing your own question or challenge. And if you do that, we are quite happy to have a chat with you, and then having sort of non-committing discussion around these different areas. Another thing is that this, as I said initially, this webinar was part of a series, so it was number 3, and we have already planned the number 4, which is coming in January. And then we are going to talk about better blend monitoring, scheduled for January the 19th. And the really good news here is that Doug, which has been with us today, is also agreed to participate in this webinar as well. And then, Doug, I guess you get an opportunity to talk more about what you're actually doing, right?
Yeah. So the solid dose is more my bread and butter, but I am a chemist by training, so certainly, comfortable with some of the reaction monitoring as well.
Yeah, so it's all homegrown for you, but that's great. And also, it's worth mentioning that this is a series, as I said, and we have a couple of other webinars planned. So there will be more of these webinars announced as we are moving into the springtime over in 2021. But for now, we're opening up for questions, and I didn't get around to tell you that, but questions, we will open up for questions in the chat. So if you have any questions after all of this, please type them into the chat, and we can try to answer them as we talk here. Any considerations from yourself, Chuck?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention is that about the offer, the expert session. Yes, the expert sessions. It's always nice to get a fresh set of eyes on a problem. So even if this is something that you are, you think you understand well, but sometimes it's nice to get just a fresh, someone with an external view. And certainly we can work with you with regard to keeping things confidential or redacting certain details, so there's no concern about proprietary information. I think it's just a general principle. And one thing I also did want to mention going back was, Doug, you mentioned this previously before the webinar. I think one of the nice values of continuous and PAT in general is bringing access to what you call more difficult chemistries. Chemistries that are either very isothermic, and I know you mentioned that previously, but that was one of the benefits that I thought was really really important to bring out. There's some chemistries that are just very, very difficult, and you can bring access to them in a business sense through these continuous systems and through these highly analytic platform technologies.
Yeah, anything you want to add to that, Doug? Or?
Well, like I said earlier, I mean, that was a big driver in terms of getting into some of these things, right? You start off with, flow reactors for, a few different, purposes, and you explore where the technology can take you. And it becomes, a tool in a toolbox, right? For a large organization like ours, I mean, we still do, plenty of batch chemistry. That's not something that's going away tomorrow. But, in both cases, exploring where, these analytics can, help you, is an important thing. And, I'll go, into an example I heard years ago that is even, from a, reaction monitoring for bioreactors is just, even monitoring like a electrical power draw on motors can, help you from, things going down at the absolute wrong time that can cost you, millions of dollars. And, having, very precious reactants, and obviously as you go from solid dose to API chemistry to biologics, the value just increases there. And so I think it's important to think about things again holistically in terms of, if you build this expertise for analytics, there's a lot of places within your organization that can do it. And the other thing I would say is that, for high value products, it makes a lot of sense, but really where you saw a lot of this stuff, start out was in low margin areas, right? Where, people are running things in very high volume and they can't really, afford to lose, stuff because the margins are slim in the first place. And so, really, being able to understand and control their processes was something that was, necessary for business survival. And I think, moving forward, that's going to become more the case for pharma as well.
Yeah. And in the extension of that, Doug, we have got a question here which might be a continuation of that thinking. But the question here is, what are your views on how we can maximize the value from PAT for reaction monitoring in R&D, where numbers of experiments will be limited, but typically run with design variation to develop a process?
Well, I mean, when you're doing that and you're running different variations, you guys can talk about that better than I. That's when you start to develop your models, right? Because, you need that variability to be able to have the model that's going to then, take you forward, right? When you get into a manufacturing environment, you're trying to keep things the same. because you need to know where those, edges are, right? And the model needs to be able to capture that. So I think the thinking about things, throughout the process is an important way to get that efficiency. If you don't think about it until, you're already on the manufacturing floor and you're already trying to make product, you've got a lot of catching up to do. And so I think, thinking about it, early on, is important. And like I said before, collaboration, right? You may be working on those things in the bench, in a more traditional QC type approach, but understanding what's going to be different when it gets to the manufacturing floor is also important, because that's some of the other variability that you need to account for, right? Like I said earlier, you may not have the time to average a large number of scans like you might from a traditional bench, and so you need to kind of understand that when you're developing things early on, to try to, again, minimize the amount of rework that you need to do as you get closer and closer to trying to really utilize these for the purpose that you're setting out for in the first place, right? You're looking to use these in your manufacturing environment to get efficiencies, to control things from a quality standpoint. And so thinking about it early on is a big part to being able to get that efficiency. And it's always that chicken or the egg, right? You have to get somebody to spend the money early on, right, to start thinking about this. But I think in organizations where it's kind of been institutionalized, it's not thought of like that anymore. There's the understanding that you need to start this earlier, so that way you have it when you want to use it.
I agree. In this design phase is very important. The domain knowledge is critical. In other words, those who are the chemistry experts, the biology experts, because you have to define. There are a lot of deliberate processes like risk assessment, risk analysis, to define which factors should be in the design to start with. So you have to define what the design variables are, and then you have to define what their levels are. And so that all involves domain knowledge early on. And even though there are probably deliberate processes like in Six Sigma, the OE risk assessment, in a lot of ways, at times you don't have a lot of time to do that. You're under a lot of pressure, and so these processes have to be somewhat informal, and that's okay as long as you capture, as long as you do it in some form. I know past employers of mine, it had to be very, very formal. It had to be a certain document, it had to be risk assessment, then you had to do FMEA, define these levels. But sometimes you don't have the time. It's okay to do it informally. The key is getting that domain knowledge early on in that design phase.
Great. Thank you for that, Chuck. So if you have any questions, more questions, please note the email addresses here. So both Chuck, myself, and Doug are listed. So feel free to approach that. And as we said earlier, if you have any need or any want for having continued this discussion, please approach us for an expert discussion. And with that, I say thank you very much to Doug, our guest star, we must say. So thank you for attending, Doug, and looking forward to next time.
Thanks for allowing me to participate. I always like talking about these things, and hopefully webinars are great, but hopefully in the future we'll get back to seeing each other more often in person, being able to talk about shop.
Yeah, looking forward to that. So thank you, Chuck, as well, and thank you everybody for listening. And as we said, this webinar is recorded, so we will make it available on the web page if you had to leave early or if you want to share it with your colleagues. So thank you all. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.